There is someone in your life who looks like a full-grown adult and has never actually grown up. They have the job, maybe, the age, the body of a person in their 30s or 40s. But somewhere inside, the growing stopped a long time ago, and a part of them is still, quietly, a child. And you feel it. You feel it in the way you end up taking care of them, in the promises that never quite happen, in the way every serious conversation somehow slides away before it lands. You've felt exhausted by this person and never quite been able to say why. And here's the unsettling part. It might not be someone else at all. It might, in some corner you don't like to look at, be you. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, gave this a name almost 100 years ago. He called it the eternal child, a person who, no matter how old they get, never fully steps into their own life. And Jung understood something about it that goes far deeper than lazy or immature or the insults people usually throw at it. He saw the machinery underneath. And by the end of this, you're going to be able to spot all 7 signs of it, in the people around you, and maybe, if you're brave, in yourself. Let me tell you why this matters so much, before we start. Because dealing with an eternal child, whether it's a partner, a friend, a grown sibling, a parent, or a coworker, slowly drains you in a way you can't name. You become the responsible one, the one who follows through, the one who carries the weight they keep putting down. And you tell yourself, they'll grow out of it, they'll step up, they'll finally take responsibility, any day now. And you wait, and you wait, and the years go by, and they don't, because nothing in their life is forcing them to. You've been carrying someone who never learned to carry themselves, right? You can already feel the face this is describing. Comment the word seen if someone just came to mind. Someone in your life who looks grown but has never quite grown up, and you've been carrying more of them than you should. I want to see how many of us are dealing with this, because it's far more common than anyone admits. Let me show you the 7 signs, and by the end, the one thing that actually helps. First, quickly, what Jung actually meant, because it's more precise than the insult version. Jung and the psychologists who worked with him described a pattern they called the eternal child. In Latin, puer aeternus, and it wasn't only about men. There's a version in every gender, but the idea is the same. It's a person who stays, psychologically, in a kind of permanent adolescence. They live in what one of Jung's closest colleagues called the provisional life, the temporary life, the life where nothing is quite committed to yet, because the real life, the real choices, the real self, is always still coming, always just around the corner, always about to begin. They're 40 years old and still, in their own mind, waiting for their life to start. And the reason this is so important, and so hard to spot, is that these people are often charming, delightful even, full of dreams and potential and interesting ideas. They don't look broken. They look like someone with their whole future ahead of them, which is exactly the problem, because they've looked that way for 20 years, and the future never arrives. Let me show you the signs. And one thing before we start, because it matters. As you go through these, you're going to think of specific people. That's natural, but I want you to also, quietly, hold up a mirror, because almost no one is entirely free of this. The question isn't whether you have a trace of the eternal child in you. Almost everyone does. The question is whether it runs your life, or whether you've learned to notice it and grow past it. So watch for the signs in others, yes, but watch too for the small flinch of recognition when one of them lands a little too close to home. That flinch is not something to be ashamed of. It's the beginning of growing up. Sign 1. They are always about to. The first sign, and the deepest one, is this. They are always about to start the business, about to get in shape, about to write the book, make the change, have the conversation, turn their life around. Their whole existence is lived in the future tense, in the space of what they're going to do, and almost never in the past tense of what they've actually done. Ask them about their plans, and they light up, because the plan, the potential, the someday, is where they truly live. Ask them what they've built, finished, committed to, and something goes vague. Jung's colleagues saw the terrible logic underneath this. As long as you're only ever about to do something, you never have to find out if you can actually do it. You never have to fail. The dream stays perfect and untouched in your head, forever, because you never drag it into the messy, disappointing, finite world of actually trying. Potential feels infinite. Achievement is always smaller than the dream. So the eternal child clings to the infinite potential and refuses the finite achievement, and calls it having big dreams, when really, it's a fear of ever putting those dreams to the test. You've watched this person for years. The one who's always on the verge, always about to break through, always full of the thing they're going to do. And somehow it's always next year. It was next year, last year too. And here's the question that cuts through it. When was the last time they actually finished something? Not started, not talked about, not planned in beautiful detail. Finished. If you have to think hard, if you keep landing on things from years ago, you're not looking at someone with a bright future. You're looking at someone who has confused having a future with having a life. The future is where they keep their whole self, safe and untested, and the present is where they never quite show up. And a person who lives entirely in the future has, in a real sense, no life at all, just a permanent rehearsal for one that never opens. Sign 2. Nothing is ever their fault. The second sign. When something goes wrong in their life, it is never, ever their fault. The job didn't work out because the boss was terrible. The relationship failed because the other person was crazy. The plan fell apart because of bad luck, bad timing, other people, the economy, their childhood, anything and anyone except the one common thread running through every single one of their disappointments, which is them. The eternal child cannot hold their own part in things, because to do that would mean growing up, and growing up is exactly what they're avoiding. This is a defining feature, because taking responsibility is the doorway to adulthood, and they will not walk through it. An adult looks at a failure and asks, "What was my part in this? What can I learn? What will I do differently?" The eternal child looks at the same failure and asks, "Whose fault is this?" and lands, every time, on someone other than themselves. And so they never learn, because learning requires ownership, and ownership is the one thing they can't afford, since it would end the childhood they're protecting. Watch how a person handles being wrong. It tells you almost everything. The one who can say, "That was on me," is an adult. The one who has never, in your entire memory, genuinely taken the blame for anything is showing you exactly where their growth stopped. Comment the word fault if you know someone who has genuinely never, not once, taken real responsibility when something went wrong. Because that single trait is one of the clearest signs there is. Sign 3. They won't fully commit to anything. The third sign. They keep every door open, forever, and walk through none of them. Commitment is the enemy, because commitment means choosing this and giving up that, and the eternal child cannot bear to give up anything. To commit to one career means letting go of all the other careers they could have had. To commit to one person means closing the door on everyone else. To commit to one place, one path, one life, means admitting they are this, and not the infinite everything they've always imagined themselves to be. So they don't commit. They keep the relationship at arm's length, one foot out the door. They keep the career optional, always ready to pivot. They keep their whole life provisional, uncommitted, temporary. Because committing would mean becoming finite, and they're terrified of being finite. And here's the tragedy in it. A life is only built through commitment. Everything real, a deep relationship, a mastered skill, a meaningful body of work, requires you to choose it and stay, through the boring parts, through the hard parts, long enough for it to become something. The person who won't commit doesn't stay free. They stay empty. They reach the end of a decade with a collection of half-started things and no deep thing at all, because depth only comes from the commitment they kept refusing. And notice the lie they tell themselves about it, because it sounds so appealing. They call it keeping their options open. Staying free, not settling? But look closely at what open options actually get you over a lifetime, and it's nothing. A door you never walk through leads nowhere. An option you never take is just a fantasy you're paying for with your real life. Freedom that's never spent on anything isn't freedom. It's paralysis, dressed up as possibility, and the person who protects their options above all else ends up, at the end, having lived none of them, holding a fistful of doors they were always too afraid to open. Who in your life keeps waiting to fully commit, keeping every option open, never quite choosing? Comment it, even just who they are to you, because naming the pattern is how you stop waiting for it to change on its own. Sign 4. Charming promises, no follow-through. The fourth sign. They make wonderful promises, and they rarely keep them. This is the one that hurts the people around them the most, because the promises feel so real in the moment. The eternal child genuinely means it when they say they'll be there, they'll change, they'll handle it, they'll show up. In the moment of promising, they feel the warm glow of being the kind of person who would do that. But the promise lives in the same imaginary future as everything else. And when the future arrives and becomes a hard, concrete, present-tense task, the follow-through isn't there. Because following through is work, and work is the thing they're organized to avoid. And notice how charming they often are, because the charm is part of the machinery. The eternal child learned, early, that being delightful, being fun, being full of promise, gets them the goodwill and the second chances that responsibility would otherwise have to earn. They coast on potential and charm, and both of them write checks that their follow-through never cashes. And you keep believing them, because they're so sincere in the moment, until you've been disappointed enough times to finally hear the pattern under the words. And here's the hard question this one forces on you. How many times does someone get to break the same promise before you stop believing the promise? Because that's the trap. Each time, they mean it so sincerely that you give them one more chance, and one more, and one more, and the sincerity is real. That's what makes it so confusing. They are not lying to you in the moment. They're lying to themselves about the future, and you're just caught in the wreckage of it. At some point, you have to start listening to what they do instead of what they say, because the doing is the truth, and the saying is just the dream. Which one have you been trusting? Now let me tell you the thing almost no one gets right about this, the part that changes everything, and it comes straight from the psychologists who studied it most deeply. You'd assume the answer to the eternal child is contempt. To mock them, shame them, call them lazy and immature, tell them to grow up. That's what the internet does with the phrase man-child, throws it as an insult. But here's what Jung's closest colleague, a brilliant psychologist named Marie-Louise von Franz, concluded after studying this pattern for years. Shame doesn't cure it. Mockery doesn't cure it. There is exactly one thing that pulls a person out of the eternal childhood, and it's almost boringly simple. Work. Real, committed, unglamorous work. Not fantasy. Not potential. Not the next exciting plan. Work. The daily, disciplined, often boring act of committing to something real and staying with it, through the parts that aren't fun, long enough to finish. Because work is the exact opposite of the provisional life. Work is finite, concrete, present tense, and it forces you to trade your infinite imaginary potential for one real, achieved, limited thing. And that trade, the giving up of infinite possibility for one finished reality, is the entire act of growing up. Von Franz saw that the eternal child isn't cured by being told to grow up. They're cured by doing the one thing they've spent their whole life avoiding, committing to real work and following it through. So if you recognize this pattern in someone you love, understand that shaming them won't reach it. And if you recognize it in yourself, and some of you just did, understand that the way out was never about feeling worse about who you are. It was always about doing one real thing, all the way to the end. And here's why work, specifically, is the cure, when nothing else is. Because you cannot think your way out of the eternal child. You cannot plan your way out, or dream your way out, or wait to feel ready. Those are all just more of the provisional life. The only thing that actually moves a person from the imaginary future into the real present is the concrete act of committing to something and doing it, today, whether they feel like it or not. Work is the bridge from potential to reality, and there is no other bridge. Every finished thing, however small, is a vote against the eternal child. It's proof, in the real world, that you can choose one thing and see it through. And enough of those votes, stacked up over time, is what a grown-up life actually is. Not a feeling of maturity that descends on you one day. A pile of finished things. Comment the word me if, somewhere in these signs, you saw a piece of yourself. It takes real courage to admit that, and the people brave enough to see it in themselves are exactly the ones who can grow out of it. Sign 5. They need someone to parent them. The 5th sign. There is always someone in their life doing the parenting they refuse to do for themselves. The eternal child does not stand on their own. They find someone, a partner, a parent who never stopped, a friend, an endlessly patient coworker, and they quietly hand that person the weight of the adult responsibilities they won't carry. The organizing, the planning, the remembering, the emotional labor. the cleaning up of the messes. And the person doing the parenting often doesn't even realize it's happening, because it comes on slowly, one dropped responsibility at a time, until one day they wake up exhausted, playing mother or father to a grown adult who has quietly outsourced their entire adulthood. And if that person is you, hear this. Every time you step in and carry what they should be carrying, you are not helping them. You are funding the childhood. You are removing the one thing that might actually make them grow, which is the natural consequence of their own choices. The eternal child stays a child, precisely because someone keeps rescuing them from adulthood. Stop rescuing, and you either force the growth, or you finally see clearly that it was never going to come. Comment the word carried if you've been the one quietly parenting a grown adult, doing the adulthood they refused to do until it wore you down. Because seeing that clearly is the first step to putting the weight back where it belongs. Sign 6. They chase the next shiny thing. The sixth sign. The moment things get real, or boring, or hard, they're gone, chasing the next exciting thing. The eternal child lives on novelty. The new plan, the new relationship, the new city, the new passion. Each one arrives in a blaze of excitement and certainty. This is the one, this is different, this is finally it. And for a while they're all in, glowing, convinced. And then the honeymoon fades, the way it always does, and the real thing underneath demands commitment, patience, and endurance through the boring middle. And that's exactly when they lose interest and start looking around for the next blaze of novelty. They mistake the excitement of beginning for the meaning of the thing, and they never stay long enough to reach the depth that only comes after the excitement fades. This is why their life is a graveyard of abandoned beginnings. So many started things, so few finished ones. A dozen hobbies, careers, relationships, all dropped at the exact point where they stopped being new and started requiring real commitment. And they'll tell you they just haven't found the right thing yet. But the truth Jung's people understood is that there is no right thing that stays exciting forever. Depth is on the other side of boredom, always, and the person who flees the moment the novelty fades will never once get there. And think about what that means for anyone in a relationship with them. Do you see the trap you'd be in? You'd be exciting, for a while. New, and then, inevitably, you'd become familiar, ordinary, real, the way every human being does to every other human being, once the newness wears off. And that's exactly the moment the eternal child starts looking over your shoulder for the next blaze of novelty. It was never about you not being enough. It's that they cannot survive the transition from exciting to real, in anything, because the real is precisely what they're running from. And you can't be new forever. Nobody can. So the question isn't whether they'll get bored. It's whether you want to build a life with someone for whom the fading of novelty is the same as the end of love. Sign 7. They're terrified of an ordinary life. And the seventh sign, the one underneath all the others. They are terrified of an ordinary life. To the eternal child, the normal adult life, the committed relationship, the steady work, the ordinary responsibilities, looks like death, like a cage, like giving up on their specialness, their potential, their destiny to be something extraordinary. And so they run from it, and dress up the running as being a free spirit, refusing to settle, holding out for something greater. But underneath the romantic language is simple fear. The fear that if they commit to a normal, real, finite life, they'll discover they were never as special as their infinite potential let them believe. As long as they never commit, they can keep the fantasy that they could have been anything. The moment they commit, they become something specific, and the something specific is always smaller than the everything they imagined. And here's the cruel joke at the center of it. In fleeing the ordinary life to protect their sense of being extraordinary, they guarantee they'll achieve nothing extraordinary at all, because everything extraordinary was ever built by someone willing to commit to the ordinary, disciplined, finite work of building it. The eternal child, terrified of an ordinary life, ends up with a life far emptier than the ordinary one they despised. They wanted to be exceptional so badly that they refused every path that could have gotten them there. Do you see the paradox? The people who actually become extraordinary are almost never the ones who held out for it, who refused the ordinary, who waited for their special destiny to arrive. They're the ones who committed to something ordinary and did it, faithfully, for years, until the accumulated weight of all that committed ordinary work became something remarkable. Greatness isn't the opposite of the ordinary life. It's what the ordinary life becomes when someone commits to it fully and stays. The eternal child, chasing the extraordinary by refusing the ordinary, is running in the exact wrong direction, away from the only road that ever leads there. So here's where I have to challenge the thing you probably came into this video believing, because it's the whole point. You think the man-child, the eternal child, is just lazy, immature, a bad, weak, contemptible person who won't get their act together. That's the popular story, and it's wrong. And getting it wrong is why nobody ever changes. Because the eternal child is usually not lazy at all. They're often energetic, charming, full of dreams, working hard at all kinds of things, just never the one committed thing that would require them to grow. And underneath it is not weakness of character, it's fear. A specific, understandable, deeply human fear. The fear that committing to one real, finite life means the death of every other life they imagined for themselves. That choosing to be something means giving up being anything. And once you see that, everything changes. Whether the eternal child is someone you love or someone you see in the mirror, you stop treating it as a character flaw to be despised and start seeing it as a fear to be moved through. The cure was never contempt. It was courage. The courage to commit to one finite, ordinary, real thing and to discover, on the other side of that terror, that a committed life isn't the death of your potential. It's the only place your potential ever actually becomes something. The eternal child protects the dream by never testing it. The adult risks the dream by living it. And only one of them ever gets to build anything real. Comment about someone you know who genuinely grew up, who committed, followed through, became reliable and deep and real. Because those people are proof it's possible, and they're the whole hope at the center of this. So let's bring the 7 signs together. Because underneath all of them is one single thing. Always about to. Never their fault. Won't commit. Charming promises, no follow-through. Need someone to parent them. Chases the next shiny thing. And terrified of an ordinary life. 7 signs, 1 root. The refusal to trade infinite imaginary potential for one finite, committed, real life. And here's the whole thing, in one sentence. The eternal child isn't a person who's too weak to grow up. It's a person who's too afraid to become finite. Because becoming finite means giving up the fantasy of being infinite. And that trade is the exact thing that growing up requires. That's what Jung and von Franz understood. And the way out, for them or for you, was never shame. It was work. One real, committed, followed-through thing, chosen over the endless glittering maybe. Because the moment you finish one real thing, all the way to the end, you've done the one act the eternal child never can, and you've started, finally, to grow up. So, the eternal child. Let me bring it home. Jung's insight has lasted 100 years because it names something we all recognize. In others and, if we're honest, in ourselves. Almost everyone has a corner of the eternal child in them. The dream they keep about toing, the commitment they keep avoiding, the ordinary, finite, real thing they keep fleeing in the name of keeping their options open. This video isn't really about pointing at other people and calling them names. It's about seeing the pattern clearly, so that where it's draining you through someone else, you can stop funding it, and where it's living in you, you can finally move through it. So here's what I want you to take from all 7 signs. If you're dealing with an eternal child, stop waiting for them to grow up on their own, and stop carrying the adulthood they've handed you. Because the carrying is exactly what keeps them a child. And if you saw yourself in this, don't spiral into shame, because shame was never the cure. Pick one thing. One real, finite, ordinary thing, and commit to it, and follow it all the way through to the end. Past the boredom. Past the fear that finishing it will make you small. Because it won't make you small. It's the one act that will finally make you an adult. And adults, it turns out, are the only people who ever build a life worth having. Tell me which of the 7 signs hit hardest. One word, in the comments, and I read them. About to. Commitment. Ordinary. Whichever one named someone, or named you. Mine, for a long time, was the first one. Always about to. Because I loved the feeling of infinite potential so much that I kept refusing to trade it for one real, finished thing. Until I did. And that's when my actual life began. What's yours? Put it down below. And whether it's someone you love or someone in the mirror, remember, The way out was never shame. It was always just one real thing, finished all the way to the end.